Peace. This your host, Selah-Shalom. And the topic of discussion today is called the womb or the tomb. In this video, I'm going to be explaining the importance of the womb, the matrix, the portal for both male and female to coming into existence in this life. So the most important aspect of the body for the woman should be the womb, the female reproductive organ. Now, to understand any disorders or diseases of the uterus, you must understand the function of the uterus. The purpose of the uterus is to nourish a fetus before birth. The uterus is connected to the fallopian tube and the cervix and vagina. The fallopian tube allows the egg to pass from the ovary to the uterus. The cervix canal is where the baby passes through during the time of birth, and the vagina is the exit. Now, the uterus has 3 layers of tissue: the endometrium, the myometrium, and the perimetrium. The endometrium meaning the inner layer, the myometrium meaning the middle layer, and the perimetrium meaning the outer layer. Now, the endometrium, which is the inner lining for the uterus, its function is to stop adhesion between the opposite walls of the myometrium. And adhesion is when one tissue rubs against another tissue. For example, the endometrium may start rubbing and clashing with the myometrium, creating inflammation and causing fibrin. And with inflammation, it's going to dry and dehydrate the cell. If it's blood, creating blood clots. The term fibrin is a fibrous involved in the clotting of blood. Now, during a menstrual cycle, the endometrium layer becomes a thick layer of tissue in preparation to receive a fertilized egg. Now, the myometrium is the middle layer of the uterus wall and is a smooth muscle. Its main function is to induce uterine contraction. The myometrium stretches during pregnancy to allow birth delivery. Now, the pyometrium is the outer serosa layer of the uterus. Serosa is a smooth membrane which secretes serous fluid. The perimetrium protects the uterus from friction by forming a smooth layer along its surface and by secreting water, serous fluid, to lubricate its surface. So moisture is an important role in keeping these 3 layers functioning properly in the uterus. Between the endometrium, the myometrium, and the perimetrium, moisture is vital to its function. The lack of moisture in those regions will create inflammation, and in return, inflammation is the root and cause of certain diseases like fibroid tumors, polyps, and things of that nature. So if a woman is suffering from endometriitis, which is inflammation of the endometrium, being the inner lining of the uterus, she is lacking moisture. So in this case, the endometrium layer of the tissue that normally is oxygenated, creating moisture, is now being dried out due to lack of moisture and oxygen. And these rules apply for the other uterus layers, the myometrium and the perimetrium. So endometriitis, myometriitis, and perimetriitis is all due to lack of moisture or lack of oxygen, creating an inflammatory and an acidic and an infectious condition. Regardless of how it came through sex or if it came through what you ate or drink, the process is still the same: inflammation. Now, what is a menstrual cycle? A menstrual cycle is when a woman bleeds monthly. The process is that the endometrium layer, the inner layer of the uterus, is shed, and blood flows from the uterus through the cervix canal and out through the vagina. And the time for periods range from 2 to 7 days. A menstrual cycle lasts 28 days, from the first period to the next period. Now, the moon cycle coincides with the cycles of a woman. In a moon cycle, the moon gives its light 28 nights and days, from the first crescent moon to the 28th last crescent moon. Now, the first 14 days, estrogen levels rise in women. Now, when we apply this to the moon cycles, the first 14 nights and days of the moon, from the first moon to the 14th moon, the light of the moon is increasing its light. And on the 14th night and day of the moon, it's a full moon. Now, estrogen makes the lining of the uterus grow and thicken. And at about the 14th day, which would be on the moon cycle, a full moon, the eggs leaves the ovary, which process is called ovulation. Now, from about the 14th to the 25th day, and during this time on the moon, the dark side of the moon increases while the light side of the moon starts to decrease. as it closes out the month. So during this time, the egg leaves the ovary, it travels through the fallopian tube to the uterus, and it is during the time the egg is attached to the uterus that a woman can get pregnant. And if a woman does not get pregnant, the egg will detach from the uterus and shed with the next period. And this is the monthly cycle of the female, coinciding with the moon cycles. Now, the lining of the vagina has mucous membranes to provide lubrication to the vagina. Being that the outer part of the vagina is the opening and is in contact with the outside environment, it will be more acidic. And the mucous membrane is there to absorb the acid from the outside environment. Likewise with the mucous membrane in the cervix and the uterus. So the mucous membrane plays an important role in these areas of the body. The mucous membrane deals with absorption and secretion, and it also prevents bodily tissue from losing moisture. See that? So the mucous membrane is there to kind of keep the moisture, and in return deal with the outside acid coming from the outside environment, neutralizing that at the same time so it doesn't get inside of the membrane. Now, if the mucous membrane is broken, then that means acid could enter in the cell and the moisture is no longer retained. And this is important to know when addressing disorders or diseases of the womb, because this is the root of uterus disorder or diseases. When the mucous membrane in the uterus becomes compromised with a strong acid. Strong acids are infections, STDs, chlamydia, gonorrhea. Those are strong acidic infections. Now, among plenty of women, there are health issues concerning the womb. Many women suffer from disorders of the uterus, such as abnormal bleeding and cramping, because the blood is not getting enough oxygen to perform its menstrual cycle properly. If you have blood clots, the process is slowing down the normal time of a period, and the menstrual cycle may take a little longer than normal. And this would be due to lack of oxygen, which is necessary for blood cells to operate properly. Fibroid tumors, polyps, uterine cancer, the same rules apply. It's due to lack of oxygen. Once cells do not get oxygen, they begin to decay and die, while other cells are being formed, while the dying cells is not being removed fast enough, and swelling occurs due to the new cells still carrying the dead cells, creating a tumor-like situation. Gonorrhea, chlamydia, HIV, and AIDS, these conditions are due to lack of moisture and broken mucous membranes due to strong acids or infections. Again, the mucous membranes lining the vagina, cervix, and uterus are there to prevent infection, which is acidic. And once the acid is stronger than what the mucous membrane can handle, the infection settles in. And acid carries a foul odor. So a woman who carries a heavy odor is consuming too much acidic foods and drinks, or is carrying a strong infection. The key is keeping the vagina, the cervix, and the uterus moistured. It is the lack of moisture that leads to these complications, as stated earlier. The uterus has 3 layers, the endometrium, the myometrium, and the perimetrium. And at the border of each layer, the moisture is there to prevent adhesion. Now, if the moisture is compromised, adhesion occurs and inflammation sets in. So in order for women to keep their female reproductive systems in order is to eat alkaline foods, such as your tropical fruits, eat your green vegetables, drink alkaline drinks, drinking plenty water. Maintaining such a diet will keep the reproductive system in proper function and order. Now, the medicinal herbal tea will address any female reproductive disorder, from fibroid tumors to polyps, uterus cancer, gonorrhea, chlamydia, because all these conditions have one thing in common: lack of oxygen and acid. The medicinal herbal tea is high in iron, which iron is responsible for transporting oxygen. So once the iron from the medicinal herbal tea reaches the arteries and veins located in the female reproductive system, it will begin to supply the uterus with oxygen and enriched blood, being iron, maintaining moisture between the endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium, maintaining oxygen to keep the mucous membrane along the lining of the uterus, cervix, and vagina from dehydrating, in return making the mucous membrane vulnerable for infection. So a proper diet along with the medicinal herbal tea will remove any vaginal infection, uterus infection, and cervix infection, and will help with infertility. See that? So a proper diet is the key here. And with that, I'd like to say peace and blessings. Shalom.